really is very true. And that's what we're going to continue to talk about for the time that we have here. Um, what happens to time after all? Like, where does it seem to go? When you're a child, you're waiting forever, it seems, to become an adult. You can't wait to get out of high school and go to college. You can't wait to start your life. You can't wait to have all these things. And it feels like it'll never come. Then when you're an adult, sometimes you think, wow, my childhood went by so quickly, and your perspective changes drastically. And as you older you get, I think the more you become acutely aware of the fact that life is going by very quickly. And that's something you find all throughout the scriptures. And so we're going to be talking about the shortness of the time and what the scriptures have to say about it, because there really is quite a bit to meditate on and think and consider this morning. So first of all, let's take a look at what it says about Jesus and his attitude toward this. And because Jesus, as you know, he was not on earth for a very long time. He died at about age 33, we think. And he started his public ministry at age 30. And general consensus is that he lived about 3.5 years as a public teacher in that public way. And so you think 3.5 years is not much time to get anything done, anything of that magnitude. And you imagine what Jesus's mission was. It was to come here and to teach the apostles, get them instructed in all the things they needed to do so that they could teach when he's no longer here. He had to go and prepare all the people for that kind of teaching. He had to teach about the kingdom. He had to call people to drastically change their mindset and to repent and come back to God. And he also had to prepare for his own death because he knew that was ultimately what he came to do as well, to be the Savior. And so when you look at how mission focused he was, you see it all the time in the scriptures. In John chapter 7, verse 33, Jesus is talking to the Jews in public, and he's telling them, he says, I shall be with you a little while longer, and then I go to him who sent me. And so here's that short time he's talking about, and it's already well into his public ministry when he's saying this. So when he's talking about a short time, he's probably talking about a year or less, roughly. Not much time at all. And so he's telling the public, get ready for this because the time is very short. And in his mind, he's always thinking about the time and what he has to get done in that time. And it never seems to escape him. He never seems to be taking any kind of relaxation or any other activity than doing God's will. In John 13, this is what he's when he's talking to the apostles in private now. He says the same thing to them that he said publicly. He says, little children, I shall be with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, where I am going, you cannot come. So now I say to you. And so now he's even telling the apostles, because the Jews in John chapter 7, when it was public, they thought, well, maybe he meant he's going to go away on some teaching mission to another country and then come back. But he's telling the apostles it's going to be very different. It's actually going to be something not what they expect. And how the way he describes time and its passage here is very clearly illustrated in John 16, which is very close in time to John 13. So he says in John 16:16, he says, a little while and you will not see me. And again, a little while and you will see me because I go to the Father. Some of his disciples said among themselves, what is this that he says to us? A little while and you will not see me, and again, a little while and you will see me. So Jesus is talking about a little while, short times. Like a short time is going to elapse while he's with them, and then he's going to go away. Some time will elapse again, and he's going to come back. And it says Jesus knew that they desired to ask him, and so apparently they didn't directly ask him that. They just kind of thought this question to themselves, and Jesus knew they were wondering about it. And he said to them in 19, most assuredly, I say to you that you will weep and lament, but the world will rejoice, and you will be sorrowful. But your sorrow will be turned into joy. A woman, when she is in labor, has sorrow because her hour has come, but as soon as she has given birth to the child, she no longer remembers the anguish for the joy that a human being has been brought into the world. Therefore, you now have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart will rejoice, and no one will take that joy from you. So when you see a passage like that, he's talking about a little while. And he says during that little while, they're going to have suffering, they're going to have pain, they're going to have things they have to go through that are not pleasant for them, maybe even difficult to bear at times. And he's saying it's going to be a lot like the pregnancy that a woman has. It's a finite amount of time, and when it ends, it ends. And during that time, however, it probably feels like it's never going to end because it's something that's constant on your mind, and it affects every aspect of your life. And so I think he's telling them, you're going to have times when your life won't be very pleasant. You're going to have times when things are not going to go the way you want them to go. and you can't engage in any kind of selfish pursuits because the world has other plans for you. And he says, but you know what? It's going to come a day where it won't be like that anymore. And you're going to be joyful on that day. And when you look back on that short time that you had that tribulation, you're going to feel differently about it. You're going to feel like a great thing has been accomplished. In the case of the childbirth here, it says a child has been born into the world, like a spiritual being has been created, like a spirit that didn't exist before. Now it lives in the world and will live eternally. That's a big deal. And so he's saying, think about how much all of your efforts here on earth are going to be worth later on down the line. And when you look back on it, you're going to think, wow, that didn't cost me anything, really. It wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. And so he's trying to get that mindset into them to realize that sometimes for a short time, life won't be what we expect. So in Luke 13, it says, on that very day, some Pharisees came saying to Jesus, get out and depart from here, for Herod wants to kill you. And he said to them, go tell that fox, behold, I cast out demons and perform cures today and tomorrow, and the third day I shall be perfected. Nevertheless, I must journey today, tomorrow, and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet should perish outside of Jerusalem. And so you see a passage like this where the Pharisees are coming up to warn Jesus. Normally they're his enemy. It looks like there's some people that felt sorry for him or just wanted to let him know that they wanted to kill Jesus. And so they're telling him, you better get out of here. You better go away for a while because it's not going to be safe for you here. And then Jesus replies to them. He says, go tell that fox. And the fox is like somebody who's a predator and someone who's subtle and who's crafty. So Herod is the one that's kind of behind this when he says, go tell that fox. Herod wants to kill him. He says, tell him that I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to keep doing miracles right here today, tomorrow, and the next day. And so what he's basically saying is, I have specific plans that I have in my mind. This is what I want to do today, tomorrow, and the next day. I'm going to go out and do these miracles. I'm going to show people I'm the Son of God. I'm going to make people whole. I'm going to draw people towards the kingdom. And they come up to him with a scary thought that says, hey, they're trying to kill you. You better stop that plan. You better do something else for a while and then come back to that later. But he doesn't change his schedule at all. It's like he knows that he's protected by God, which he definitely is. And he knows that this is God's work he's doing. And there's no reason for him to fear Herod more than he fears God, because he knows that he's there to do God's will. And so he's not set back by this at all when he even gets a death threat. He basically says, I have this plan today, tomorrow, and the next day. I'm going to keep doing that. And I don't think he really means like a 3-day plan. I think he means now in the short term and then probably in the longer future. I have these plans and I'm just not going to change them. So regardless of all those threats, he continues to do what he's doing. Kind of reminds me of the scene in Revelation where it mentions that there are souls that had been martyred for the cause of Christ in Revelation chapter 6. And, they cry out and they say, how long will it be before you avenge us? And then he says, it's going to take a little bit of time until the others have completed their testimony before they're going to be here too. And so you see all this little bit of time and the suffering and how death should not even come into our consideration as Christians. We can't be interrupted in God's service because whatever we do, live or die, we do it for Christ. So if you look at what it says in John 9, this is one of the hymns that we sang today where it said, work for the night is coming. It comes from a passage like this in John chapter 9. And this is the chapter where he heals a blind man. And the first 3 verses, you remember the apostles come up and ask him this question kind of callously as a blind beggar was standing right there. And they said, who sinned, Master, this person here or his parents? Why was he born blind? Why is his life so bad? And Jesus says, it wasn't him, it wasn't his parents, it wasn't because of anybody's sin, it was to be able to show the glory of God. He was born that way so that he could be healed by Jesus and testify of God's great power and save a lot of people in so doing. So then in verse 4, it says, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And so Jesus here is showing once again an attention to all the time that he's trying to spend doing God's will. And he knows that he has a limited frame of time in which to do these things. There's a window that's kind of collapsing slowly. The longer he lives, the less time he has to do what he has to do. And that's why he says, while it's day, while you're able to work, that's when we should do things. And that's how he thought. When he talks about being the light of the world, the daytime and there's light in the daytime, he's basically saying there's going to come a time when he won't be in the world. He won't be the physical light of the world anymore when he leaves the earth. His testimony is still there. All the things that he did speak to him, but people won't be able to see him anymore. And will basically be like that blind man who couldn't see things before. And so Jesus is basically saying, while it is daytime, we have to work. He tells the same thing to the apostles later. In John 12, he says, Jesus said to them, a little while longer, the light is with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. He who walks in darkness does not know where he's going. While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may become the sons of light. These things Jesus spoke and departed and was hidden from them. And so basically, this passage, he's telling the apostles the same thing, but he's giving them this sense of urgency and telling them that while it's daytime, that's your opportunity. And in other words, while you're alive is another way to look at that. As long as you're able to do things, you should take advantage of those times because that's what he is saying himself for himself as well. So all these passages show how focused Jesus is on taking advantage of that short time that he has. And so Jesus does know his time is short, but there's another point to be made here. The scriptures also tell us that Satan knows his time is short as well too. So just as much as Jesus was aware of this limited time he had to do what he wants to do, Satan also knows his time is limited. His time is short, and he has a limited time to do what he wants to do. And this is why he's so busy and so furious. You look at what it says in Revelation 12. It says, then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, that would be the devil, who accused them before our God day and night has been cast down. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives to the death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. So if you read that far, it sounds like a great victory over Satan. But when you read that last part, it says, woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you having great wrath, because he knows that he has a short time. So this tells us why Satan is so vengeful, so hateful, and so dedicated to his purpose, which is an evil one. He knows that he doesn't have very much time to do all the evil things that he wants to do. And even he knows that he has to have proper time management to do what he wants to do. You look at what it says in Revelation 13 about the persecution of the Christians in the early days. It says, talking about a beast that came up out of the sea, it says, he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. He opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. There's a lot of opinion about what that beast represents, and a lot of people think that it represents the Roman Empire, which is one very possible application, and it very much fits, I think, with what you read there. But you also see how this authority was delegated for some amount of time here. Satan didn't have an infinite amount of time to do whatever he wants with no consequences. He's doing horrible things here. Blasphemy against God, his name, his tabernacle, the saints, everything he can think of, he's tearing down and ruining. But it's limited to this amount of time that's specified here as 42 months. And if you think about what that actually is, that's the number you see in Revelation very often. Sometimes it says 42 months, which is 3.5 years if you add that up. But it's also described as 1,260 days in Revelation in different places. That's also 3.5 years. Sometimes you see the phrase a time, times, and half a time. So 1 plus 2 plus a half, 3.5. It's a very common amount that you see it figuratively in Revelation. But that 3.5 years means that it's a limited amount of time. That's what it's telling you. 7 is the completion number, they say in Revelation. 3.5 is an incomplete thing. And so that's basically saying that there's a finite amount of time that Satan has. I find it very interesting that 3.5 years corresponds literally to Jesus' life in his public ministry, because it was also 3.5 years. And so just like God knows that that Jesus is going to have to take advantage of his time, Satan thought the same way. Revelation 20 talks about the devil's ultimate destiny, and it says, he cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal on him so that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished. But after these things, he must be released for a little while. And so all throughout Revelation, you see these references to a little while, these times of trial where Satan would be released on people again, where he would be given more authority, as you saw in the previous passage, for a time to test God and to make war against the saints. But it says what? It says it's a little time, because it's not going to be very much time in the grand scheme of things. Satan will have some amount of time to do that. It reminds me in chapter 8 of Matthew when Jesus is casting demons out of a man that had been possessed. And you see what it says in verse 29 there when he's casting them out. They yell out at Jesus, "What have we to do with you, Jesus, you Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Now, here you see all of a sudden they're worried about the time again. They think, why are we being cast out so early? Why have we lost our authority and our power? Who's taking it away from us? I thought we had some longer amount of time to go. That's their mentality. And so they think that they have all this time to go and do evil and to wreck the world and to make souls be lost. And Jesus here is showing that he has the power to stop that at any time, and he can take that away. And so when it says before the time, you see how even they are thinking of that limited time they have. They thought, what happened? Our time ran out early? So you see that's very, very much on the mind of Satan and on his saints, or his angels. But lastly, the three things that we should think about then is we also better know that our time is short too, because Jesus knew it and Satan knows it. So what does that mean for us? You look at all these passages that you find here, there's a lot of interesting ones. These are all things that talk about what our life is like in terms of its length, in terms of its substance. You see in Psalm 90, verse 9 and 10, it says, "For all our days have passed away in your wrath. We finish our years like a sigh. The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away." So it sounds very accurate then and now. You still find people that do make it into their 90s, and we're always happy to see when that happens. But we're all so acutely aware of how much our time is limited here on Earth. And so when it says we finish our years like a sigh, that's like one of the most ephemeral things you can imagine. There's no substance to it. It's just a sound that goes away. And it's like the end of your existence, and that's all it was. In First Chronicles 29, it says it's like a shadow. It says, "For we are aliens and pilgrims before you, as were all our fathers. Our days on earth are as a shadow." The shadow is something that doesn't even feel real because it's just a reflection of something, and it goes away so quickly. When the light source that's causing it goes away, it's gone. And so that's like our life. It looks real, it looks like it's moving around, and then suddenly it's not there anymore. In Job 9, it says, "My days are swifter than a runner. They flee away." This is like the runners that would carry messages in time of war or something. They run as fast as they can because there's no email, there's no secure communications. They just run as fast as they can and get to where they need to go. And so you think about someone running fast, that's what our life is like. It doesn't slow down, it doesn't stop. It gets to its destination much sooner than we even think is going to happen. Psalm 39, "Lord, make me know my end, and what is the measure of my days, that I may know how frail I am. Indeed, you have made my days as handbreadths." That's the width of a hand. "And my age is as nothing before you. Surely every man at his best state is but vapor. Surely every man walks about like a shadow. Surely they busy themselves in vain. He heaps up riches and does not know who will gather them." Very, very poetic words, but all very true in what David is saying here in this. And it talks about how we ought to make an acknowledgement to ourselves in the early verses here in verse 4, how we ought to know how limited our time is in the days that we have before us, and how different that is from God, who is eternal and has been around forever and will always be there. Job 7 says that my days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle. You imagine somebody running one of those machines that runs very quickly and makes different fabrics and blankets and things like that. If they're very good at it, it's extremely fast and you can barely see their hands because they're just blurring. And so that's what he's saying. It's like he's saying my life is like that. There's this thing that's being constructed, that's being left behind, and it's a beautiful thing, but yet it's happening so quickly that I can't even see all the little steps that are taking place day to day. James 4, of course, also calls it a vapor. It says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, and buy and sell, and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It's even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil." So in the New Testament, it carries the same metaphor that we saw in some of the earlier passages, how our life is really like a vapor that's only there for a short time and goes away. Like how many times have you seen fog in the morning around here, and then afternoon it's burned off and it's gone? It's like it wasn't there ever. That's what our life is like. When someone is gone, you suddenly don't see the things that they're doing anymore because they don't do anything anymore. It's all memories at that point, and it's all things that will have an effect in eternity, but we don't get to see them anymore. So that's why our life is like a vapor. And in 1 Peter 1, it says, all flesh is as grass, and the glory of man as the flower of the grass. That the grass withers, the flower falls away. So things that give life and things that give beauty, they're there for a time. And you see a person's life, and that's what it's like here on earth. But then at some point, it becomes a memory, just like when the flower of the field fades. You go to see all the wildflowers in Rainier or something around July. They're beautiful, but if you go there a couple of months after that, there won't be any. They're not going to be there, and that beauty's gone. And so that's how we have to understand our life is like that from an earthly perspective. So the question we have to ask ourselves, knowing that, is what do we do with that knowledge? It's one thing to say our life is short, because a lot of people can figure that out. Even without the Bible, you can figure out that your life is really a short thing in the end. Well, let's think about what it means, actually. 1 Peter 1:6. One thing we can see here is that the fact that our life is short is a good thing in a lot of ways because it's full of trials and tribulation. In 1 Peter 1:6, it says, "In this you greatly rejoice," talking about our salvation, "though now, for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials." And so when we see that, we understand that we're supposed to rejoice in our salvation, but it does say for a little while, we're going to have things to go through in this life. And we have that great rejoicing, but sometimes things that happen to us in our life or things that we observe, things that happen to others, they try to take away that joy. They try to distract us from our focus, from our mission. And they make us focus more on the pain, the suffering, the things that are negative. And they want to take away that joy and that salvation that we know so confidently that we have in Jesus Christ. And so we know, fortunately, that it's going to be a short time that we have those trials. Just like it says in Revelation 6 about the people that were killed for their testimony, it says, "Then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brethren, who would be killed as they were, was completed." And so here it's talking about people probably in the first century that gave their lives for their faith. And it says a little while longer, that was going to keep going on. People were still going to be killed as martyrs for the cause of Christ. And it says that they rested, those people that had been killed, and they are comforted because they have those robes. They're well taken care of in paradise. But the people that are left behind on earth during that persecution have to go through that a little while longer. How much is a little while? You can't answer that question, right? We don't know. It's not specified and it's not meant to tell us. But it does mean that for a short time, we do have to deal with that here while we're here. In 1 Corinthians 7, Paul said, "But this I say, brethren, the time is short, so that from now on, even those who have wives should be as though they had none, those who weep as though they did not weep, those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice, those who buy as though they did not possess, and those who use this world as not misusing it, for the form of this world is passing away." And here he's talking in context about actually marriage, and he's giving advice to some of the people in that time in the city of Corinth that it might be better to hold off on getting married during those times, during those years, because a strong persecution was coming. And he clearly said that there's no problem if they get married. He's just telling them, you're going to have a hard time. And he says, think about it before you go into such a thing. But when it says the time is short, he's saying, though even those who have wives should be like they had none. And so what he really is saying there is not that they should act like single people. He's saying you have to make sure that you have no distractions whatsoever spiritually from your service to God. One of the things he said at the beginning of 1 Corinthians 7 is how married people have to attend to the needs of their spouse and their family and all the other obligations that we have in life. And that's the way God designed it. But he also talked about how some people that never married also had plenty of time to devote to God. And Paul was one of those people. And so he knew about that. And so he's saying even people who are married should have that first commitment to God before anything else in their life, even before all family. You know how people wanted to, Jesus called them to follow him, and he says, let me go bury my father, or I've just married a wife, I need to go attend to her. All these things that people gave as excuses, Jesus said, whoever loves father or mother or son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And so we have to understand that this time that we have to divide between all the earthly things we do and all the things for God. But we should never come to a point where we say God is in second place. That's the whole point here. That's what I think he means in 1 Corinthians 7. So as we think about this, the reality of our lives being short, here's what it says in Romans 13:11. It says, and do this, knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep. For now our salvation is nearer than when we first believed. And so he's kind of saying to Christians, don't sleep your life away. Because if you think about what sleep is, it's inactivity, it's not being vigilant, it's just throwing time away in a lot of ways. You know, you have to sleep to survive. But if you sleep 24 hours a day, that's not a good thing. You won't get anything done, nothing will be accomplished. And what he's saying is, as Christians, we need to balance that and wake up out of the stupor that sometimes we find ourselves in and realize that our life is going on and on and on. And every day on the calendar that we survive, it marks one day closer to the end of our opportunity to do things on earth. And so that's why he's saying knowing the time. When you see this in Ephesians 5:15, it says, see then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. And here, when it's talking about walking circumspectly, it means like looking around you and understanding your environment, understanding where you are. Don't think of yourself as just, detached from the world. We have to understand as wise people what God's will is and do it. The same phrase, redeeming the time, is also in Colossians 4, where it says, walk in wisdom towards those who are without, redeeming the time. And when it says towards those who are without, it's talking about the unconverted people. It's talking about non-Christians who haven't given their lives to Jesus and become Christians. And it says we ought to spend our time wisely interacting with those people, being a good example towards those people so that they have something that attracts them to the gospel rather than pushes them away from the gospel. And so both of those things mention redeeming the time. So you think about that, redeeming the time is kind of an odd phrase. And you think about redeem, how is that usually used in the scriptures? It's usually used to talk about our souls, how we were redeemed by Jesus Christ. In 1 Peter 4:2, it's talking about the people that become Christians. It says that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh for the lusts of men, but for the will of God. You see a phrase like that, and it's talking about a big change and how before we were very selfishly indulging in things that had no purpose for God, no purpose for other people. They really were just selfish pursuits, and most of them would be things that would even be spiritually damaging. And it says we ought to remember that the rest of our time should be dealt with differently when it says the rest of our time. He's acknowledging that we wasted a lot of time in the past before we really became truly dedicated Christians, doing things that had no spiritual benefit whatsoever and that were often damaging spiritually. And so we ought to think about it that way. The rest of our time ought to be used for the things for God. We can't change what's happened in the past. We can be forgiven for it, but that time is gone and it doesn't come back. In 1 Peter 1:17, it says, if you call on the Father, who without partiality judges according to each one's work, conduct yourselves throughout the time of your stay here in fear, knowing that you were not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold from your aimless conduct received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. So again, he's talking about the time of our stay here. That means during your lifespan, however long that is. And he's also talking about being redeemed by Christ and how we were redeemed not with gold and silver, but the blood of Christ. And so you see that phrase that we saw earlier, we ought to redeem the time as Christians. The idea is just as we have been redeemed, our souls are redeemed by Christ, we ought to also redeem that time that we've lost. And by redeem, we have to think about what that really means. Do we spend the rest of our life living the same way without changing, or do we change to try to actually do good things for God in the time that we have left? You see that also in Titus 3, where it says, "For we ourselves were also once foolish, disobedient, deceived, serving various lusts and pleasures, living in malice and envy, hateful and hating one another. But he saved us through the washing of regeneration and the renewing of the Holy Spirit." And so when you see all these phrases, we have to understand that that's what it means to redeem the time, to take all the time that we've wasted and the remaining time, put it to good use. Knowing that we've been forgiven for those things as Christians, know that we have to take the rest of our time seriously and not keep doing the same things that we used to do. And so, from all the things that we just looked at in these passages, what do we do with this knowledge? I think to summarize the points we've just been talking about, you can see that it has to do with waking up and knowing the reality of our situation. It says the time is short, we've lived a long life, and we're closer to the end than to the beginning. The hourglass that I showed at the beginning, it has less sand in the top than it has in the bottom. That's how it is for many of us. Second, it says know the importance to us and to others. And so we have to understand what our purpose and our mission is here, why this is so important. If we don't understand the importance of it, we won't want to prioritize our time, or we'll just think that we're forgiven for everything and that's good, so we're no problems. That's not a time prioritization strategy. Don't fear threats, perceived or real. We saw how he told the apostles and he told the Christians in the first century, you're going to have persecution, you're going to have threats. Some of you will be killed. Those are real threats. And many times it's just the threat of being laughed at. Many times it's the threat of being ostracized. Those kind of things we can deal with. But no matter what it is, real or perceived, the threat, we have to understand that it should not detract us from putting our time to best use for God. And of course, redeeming our lost time. Go back and change all the things that we did before by not repeating them, by living a different way, showing that example that we really should have done in the first place. And so this lesson is not meant to create like sadness or fear or panic. It's meant to inspire us to live faithfully for God. And so many things in the scriptures talk about the importance of taking advantage of the time. And haven't we all spent way too much time already in wasteful things in the past? I'm sure all of us can feel that way and can point to those things in our past that didn't contribute whatsoever to anything good. So live each moment the way we ought to, like it's precious because it really is. And the most important thing we can say is never put off obedience to God. You read about people in the scriptures like Agrippa that wanted to come back at a more convenient time to obey the gospel. You know, it begins with that. You have to obey the gospel, become a Christian, and after that, you still continue putting God first. You have to make that decision by becoming a Christian, by being baptized, but it's a daily decision that we have to make. And the more we realize that that is our mission here in life, the sooner we'll get awake out of sleep, and the sooner we'll start to do those things that really do befit God's glory and help us to become more Christ-like. You know, in Ecclesiastes 12, it talks about remembering your Creator in the days of your youth. That's because you have the most time left. You know, if someone learns the scriptures and learns to dedicate their life to God in their youth, they're going to be able to do a lot more things than someone who in their 50s decides to become a Christian and then serve God. But you know what? They're both of them can go to heaven, but one of them will do a lot more for God. And that's not, it doesn't mean that he deserves it more. It doesn't mean anything like that. It just means the right thing will be happening from an early age. It mentions also in Ecclesiastes 12 there, not only do you need to remember the Creator in the days of your youth, but it also says the days will be coming later when it won't be so easy and there'll be a lot of distractions and you may not even want to be a Christian at that point. And then at the end of the whole book of Ecclesiastes, what does it say? Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. How soon do we figure out that message? The earliest that we can do that in life, the better. Because why? The time is short. All flesh is like grass, but the word of the Lord endures forever. And the word of the Lord is what will judge us in the end. So hopefully this is a lesson that resonates with us and helps us to think about the time being as short as it is, not to scare us again, but to make sure that we really do prioritize our time like Jesus did. If there's anyone that would like to respond to the gospel, we offer a convenient time. We're going to stand and sing song number 624, if you're able to stand. 624 will be the song of